in the previous sections, we have learned about the PPF models. In these sections, we are going to use the model to explain why there is always an opportunity to gain from trades. Well, first of all, we would like to understand why countries sometimes make trade with each other. Well, there are several reasons that actually make a valid argument. Number one, maybe the country is trying to get something that they don't have or they cannot produce themselves. Number two, they are trying to get the same thing that can produce at a much lower price or much lower cost somewhere else. Or maybe number three, to make each other better off. And of course, sometimes it's also related to the political objectives or agendas. For example, sometimes America want to make trade with other countries because we want to foster the international ties. But regardless, I think in any trade scenario, there's only one common result, is that after the trade, both countries actually getting a better result or getting a more desirable outcomes. So economists actually use this production possibility frontier and trying to explain the incentive for trading. Well, today we are going to use this very simple two agency PPF models to demonstrate how a trade can benefit both sides. So in this table and graphs, we are demonstrating the two PPF model in two countries. One is Canada, the other one is the United States. And we assume both countries are producing exactly the same thing. Either they produce honey or maple syrup, or maybe they can produce a combination of both. Well, the ultimate goal in this demonstration is to find a solutions where the two countries can trade each other, and at the end they can both better off. And by meaning of better off, we basically means that both countries can reach beyond their PPF at the same time. Well, there are some easy steps that we follow in this trade scenario. Well, step one, it's always the case, we want to start with calculating the opportunity cost for producing the two products in both countries. Well, in this case, I already done the math for you. So in Canada, if the country want to produce one more units of honey, they have to give up 1.5 units of maple syrup. And if they want to produce 1 unit additional maple syrup, they have to give up 2 1/3 honey in the countries. On the other hand, United States has a 1-to-1 ratios where they produce 1 additional units of honey, they have to give up 1 unit of maple syrup productions. And on the other hand, same for the maple syrup productions, they have to give up 1 exact units for honey. Once we calculate the opportunity cost for producing the two products in both countries, then we can move into step 2. So in step 2, we're basically trying to compare the cost or opportunity cost to produce the two products in both countries. Well, as you can see here, since Canada has a lower opportunity cost for maple syrup productions comparing to the United States, because Canada only have to give up 2/3 of honey in order to make 1 more maple syrup, but United States have to give up 1 exact unit honey to make 1 unit of maple syrup. So therefore, we actually say that Canada has the comparative advantage to produce maple syrup in this case. On the other hand, well, the United States actually has the comparative advantage to produce honey because they have a lower cost comparing to Canada to produce honey. Well, once we find the comparative advantage of the countries to produce what products, well, we take a very simple rule here. We call this a specialization rule. So the specialization rule basically tells us whoever or whichever country that can produce the same goods at a lower opportunity cost, they should focus on these productions and what we mean by specializations. So they should specialize in that particular productions. And in this case, because Canada is so good producing maple syrup comparing to the United States, and that's why they will devote all the resources to produce maple syrup, which they will get maximum of 60 tons of maple syrup. And the United States will specialize in honey productions, and they will get maximum of 50 tons of honey. Once we follow the specialization rule in these steps, well, the last step here is to make a trade proposal. So in this case, we are proposing United States to trade 20 tons of honey to Canada in exchange for 25 tons of maple syrup. Well, after the exchange or the trade, Canada is going to have 20 tons of honey and 35 tons of maple syrup. And United States finally will get 30 tons of honey and 25 tons of maple syrup after the trades. Are they better off? Well, of course, by just looking at the number could be very difficult to tell. And that's why we are going to demonstrate this with a graph. So as you can see, we have the PPF of the two countries here. So if the solution we get from the trade is actually beyond the PPF for both countries, then we achieve our goals. So as you can see, the solution we get from the trade actually allowed both countries to reach beyond their PPF or the boundaries of productions. So that's why by trading the goods to each other, both countries actually doing better at the same time. So in this case, there is no one country taking advantage of the other so that they are better off, but both of them are actually better off because they are willing to specialize on what they do good at and also willing to trade with each other. Well, when we get to the topic of trade, it's very easy for people to get confused about what we call the absolute advantage in trade. So I think most of you guys actually getting the idea of what we mean by comparative advantage. The comparative advantage is always related to the opportunity cost calculations. However, there are some cases where people might think that, especially in this case, when United States can maximally produce 500 units of automobile or maybe maximum of 500 units of computer, comparing to China where they can maximally produce 100 units of automobile or maybe 200 units maximum units of computer. Most of the people think that United States is superior in productions, so they don't need to trade with China. However, again, what we studied earlier, it's not based on what we call the absolute advantage in this case. So the absolute advantage here basically demonstrates the United States can produce more goods than the other country given the same amounts of resources to produce it. But the absolute advantage does not determine the benefit of trade. The benefit of trade is always derived from the comparative advantage. So in this case, well, if someone actually asks you, United States, does it worth to trade with China? And your answer should be, well, let's first take a look at the comparative advantage. So in this case, obviously, China has the comparative advantage to produce computer as compared to the United States, and United States has the comparative advantage to produce automobile comparing to China. If they follow the specialization rule, United States only produce automobile and China only produce computer. And after that, they were willing to exchange with each other and take advantage of trade. They will always be able to reach beyond their PPF models. So again, the absolute advantage has no use in the trade talk. It only demonstrates one country is superior in productions to the other, but it doesn't mean that they should not trade with other countries. Trade is only determined by the comparative advantage and specialization rule. So in this chapter, we actually cover many topics related to production possibility frontier model. I think the most important takeaway by the end of this chapter is to know that there is always an opportunity for us to take advantage of trade. And that's why in the next lessons, we are going to learn about a model called supply and demand, and to see how people taking advantage to make transactions or trade in the market structure. So I will see you guys next time.